Hello, everybody. Um, I'd like to welcome you to today's session and thank you for sharing your last few summer days with us. We think this is a very worthwhile topic to discuss on preparing for multilingual teams. And for those of you who are attending, most of you know what TrainingPros is and what it does. We work with clients on their learning and development and technical communications initiatives. That's a very short way of describing it. And why do people like to work with TrainingPros? You will notice when you meet any people from TrainingPros that our relationship managers are mostly industry experts who have served themselves as either training directors, training managers, or consultants and high-powered consultants. We have a pretty good pool of the best and loyal consultants and talent, and we have a proven onboarding method for success. We'd like to invite you to learn more about TrainingPros through our website, training-pros.com, and call anyone there, and you'll learn more about us. About myself, I am a New York City based relationship manager, and I served the Northeast region. My background is heavy on IT, financial services, insurance, healthcare, and as well as education. And what I'm strongest in is e-learning, instructional design, technical communications, performance support, and IT training. Here are some of the other sources of talent for TrainingPros. Um, Instructional design is very big. E-learning, for example. Usability is another level of interest. Project management, including performance support, technical communications, and of course, we offer global translation. In fact, in tandem with Globalize, which is an organization that Ray represents. So without much ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker for this afternoon. You've read his bio. One of the things you need to know about him is that he's a die-hard Bulldogs fan, University of Georgia football. And this guy has traveled 39 countries all in 1 month. No, just kidding. His most recent visit was Colombia. He was in Turkey a lot last year, and Bulgaria, I think, 2 years ago. And I asked Ray what languages he himself speaks. He claims to be great at one and a half languages. That's English and half of Spanish. All right, let's welcome Ray. Thanks.
Hello, thank you, Malu. Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your day to hear me speak about the 5 crucial steps for training multilingual teams. And yes, I am a diehard dog, and I speak one and a half languages because my last name is Reyes. My family is from Spain, and I was born and raised in the South, so I speak Spanglish. So hopefully you find that humorous. With that said, today I want to talk about what I feel is very crucial as the world expands and globalization is becoming a common term in corporate America. As we look at the 5 crucial steps when training multilingual teams, we're gonna go through the steps, but I'm gonna preface this first with some data. Here's some fun facts that I got from the eLearningindustry.com website. $322 billion was spent on global training in 2016, of which $150 billion was spent on training in North America, which was an increase of almost 5% from 2015. They're expecting that to increase equally this year But as it pertains to this presentation, almost 1% was also spent on the localization of training materials. So we're looking at $1.5 billion spent on localization. Unfortunately, a lot of that was done to check the box. A lot of that was done transactionally and not really looked at from a strategic perspective. So today we're going to look at that and how we can take these 5 crucial steps, adopt them, and become strategic in reaching our multilingual audiences. First one, we're going to talk about you have to know your audience, and I mean know your audience intimately, right? Cultural, age, education, learning styles. We'll talk about the 7 learning styles later, but as you enter into different countries and are exposed to different culture, they change dramatically. We're going to talk about having a checklist, right? You have to have a strategy and setting the right goals. If you don't have the right goals in multilingual training, your localization efforts are just then everything is ad hoc and you're kind of chasing your own tail. I recommend, and I think is a best practice in reaching global audiences, is that you need to consider localization during the design phase. We recently worked with a large public company in localizing compliance training materials in Storyline, and their use of jargon was so extreme that they had to scratch that entire program of a half a dozen different modules, recreate that because they referred to to people on their team like Mr. Wow and Mrs. Awesome. Well, Mr. Wow and Mrs. Awesome doesn't localize or translate well into Arabic. So we had to start over from scratch. So you really need to consider localization during the design phase. It's absolutely imperative that you have the right team, the right stakeholders, not just on the creation side, but also on the review side and the end user side. You need feedback. This isn't a let's complete it, toss it over to our teams in a different country, and they're going to love it. It has to be collaborative from the very beginning. And then you have to understand what so many companies don't realize is that you own those linguistic assets. There's translation memories and there's technology behind localization that companies like ours utilize in order to make sure that we maximize the accuracy and make sure we reduce your costs, but it leaves behind what I call digital breadcrumbs, translation memories, glossaries, style guides. The end user, the client company actually owns those, and it's very important that you make sure that you receive those from your teams and how you would use that later on in future projects. So as we look at knowing your audience and need to really define who your target audience is, whether it's a team of executives, whether it's customers, whether it's a compliance team, whether you're trying to reduce injuries, it's a safety audience. If you don't have a well-defined target audience, you can't localize accurately. You have to take all this into consideration when you look at their culture. Having a female in a storyline video and using their audio to certain cultures can be deemed offensive and vice versa. So you have to make sure you understand who your audience is and take in all the cultural considerations. And learning styles are so different from country to country and culture to culture. Some instructor-led training is mandatory. Some online is looked at as being beneath them. So you have to really understand your target audience and their learning style so you can narrowly define how to reach them. And we do that by making sure you understand those demographics and their educational background. What is their knowledge of the subject matter that you're reaching out and trying to teach them? What is the behavioral change that you're trying to optimize through this course? And how does culture affect that change? Culture, I had a class in B school where Michael Porter said culture trumps everything. Right? Culture will outdo your strategy, will overcome your product's greatness, it will change everything. If you don't understand the cultural impacts, you'll never be able to embody the multilingual, multicultural teams. You have to understand their customs and their laws. What may be customary here in the United States may not be customary even someplace like the UK or France, or especially in Asia or East Asia. We really need to understand that. And then sometimes there's even laws that come into play that you need to understand. And what is the attitude about the subject matter, right? Is it looked at as safety can be very nonchalant in a lot of countries. Even in Mexico, which is our neighbor to the south, their safety guidelines are a lot less stringent than those here in the United States. So we need to make sure that we understand what is their cultural attitude on the subject matter that you're trying to teach. What is your communication style? What is their learning style, right? So if you have a narration in a storyline file, or if you're having cloud-based learning, you have to make sure that you're speaking in a formal tone. If it yes ma'am, no ma'am is very Eastern, and Western can be more formal with the yous and the he's, right? So you have to make sure that your use of formal and informal is accurate, or you can offend people. And then a lot of trainers come back and say, yeah, we're not getting the results on our training initiatives with this group of this target group we're trying to reach. And then come to turn out, it wasn't the target group, it was how they were being taught. It was either they were alienating them because it was informal and they felt insulted, or maybe it was a subject matter that they didn't really understand. So you have to take in all the cultural considerations. And this is huge when it comes to learning styles. Multilingual equals diverse. We all know that here in the States. The diverse is a very common term in our world today. But what we don't understand is how does that impact the learning styles? How does a multilingual team and a multicultural team, what is the impact on their learning style? All of the 7 learning styles you guys know better than I do, right? So you have the visual, the physical, how they hear or speak, and hear things, the verbal, the logical, which is a big cultural impact, and social. I mean, these are very big cultural impacts in their learning style. If you don't understand what the difference is in these 7 learning styles in different cultures, it's hard for you to create and deliver effective training, whether it's compliance, whether it's HR, whether it's product, whether it's customer service, whether it's new hire, career path, whatever those training modules you're trying to deliver to a multicultural team, if you don't understand the impact or work with a team that understands the impact of these 7 learning styles, the chances of you being successful go down greatly. You have to make sure to be creative too, right? So if you deliver what you deliver in the United States may not be well received in a different culture, in a different country. So you have to be creative in how you deliver that. What may be deemed creative here in the States may not be so creative somewhere else. What may be creative somewhere else may not be the same here. For example, the UK and the United States, we always make jokes about British humor. There's a classic example of making sure that the creativity that you use is well received in any culture. And if you don't have a real plan and a checklist to manage and monitor the project, you will have some major hiccups and issues. First, you have to prioritize the content for localization. You definitely have a testing schedule. Like, so we're going to localize and deliver, test, localize, and deliver. Right, so you have to make sure you have a prioritized schedule, or you'll get off the rails quickly. And we're going to talk about this in a few minutes. This is where I think the biggest disconnect and failures happen in all translation projects, and especially in the e-learning world, is understanding how to review localization projects. So many times people will complete a project, send it off for review. Now you have a review person or team has this entire project to review, and it gets real convoluted, ambiguous to them, and they get checked out because of the workload you've given them. So you have to have a well-established methodology in your review. We talked about prioritization of the localization content. You need leadership curriculum has to come to the top, right? If you're reaching a leadership team, you make sure you get to them and prioritize. If you have a lot of stuff to localize, reach for your leadership team first. Of course, safety, because of the impact it will have in so many different areas. Compliance, make sure everyone's doing the right thing. We recently worked on a large compliance project for a publicly traded company here in the States. You spend 7 figures on a compliance program, and then they reach out and try to get a quote for the cheapest bidder to localize it, and come to find out it turns out to a nightmare. Then they reach out to a subject matter expert to fix it. Now your costs have increased. So you need to make sure that when doing this, you prioritize the compliance part to be there. Delivery schedule we talked about. It's important that when you translate and localize, you test it and you continue testing. You have a delivery date. You make sure you stay on target. If your go live date is September 1st, you need to make sure you have everything tested on all platforms, whether it's mobile, Google, Microsoft, Firefox, whatever the platform is. Test on all platforms at least 30 days before that. Had the testing wrinkles worked out before you push it out to your teams. Stay to your go live date and work backwards. If you don't do that, then you're going to be working to try to catch up at all times. And I can't stress enough about testing and delivering. Everyone thinks that localization is an event. It's a one-time process. Let me go ahead and send this to our translation company or our localization partner. They'll translate it. I'll get it back. We'll push it out to the different cultures and different markets. That's a recipe for failure. If you're completing your entire project at one time, sending it out for review, and then sending it out to your end users and your learners, you're going to have a lot of issues with that methodology. So the biggest part we talked about is the secret sauce of localization. And this is where I said the rubber meets the road, where everything changes, is in your review methodology. Best in class methodology in our world, for those of us who only do localization for learning and training, is that you create style guides and glossaries, a very well-defined large glossary. The larger the glossary, the better the project will turn out. You work with and identify your review team in the beginning. You do the glossary, they sign off on it. You get them to buy in, say, we're a team, we're doing this together. You know, this all goes south, it's on both of us. And then you do bits and pieces and send it to them in phases so they can do the review on their time correctly. Otherwise, you overload them. And 99 times out of 100, your reviewer isn't getting comped, or isn't part of his KPI, or isn't part of his daily routine to do translation review. So they see this big workload hit their desk. They feel put out by it. They feel annoyed. And next thing you know, they see an American company doing the localization that they're sending to their teams, whether it's in Egypt, France, or Germany, or Brazil, and they're confused and not understanding that we're using in-country linguists. We just have to be an American company. So you have to make sure that you get review buy-in from your review team, and make sure your methodology is well defined. In doing so, we have a collaborative approach. Like I said, back and forth. You do the glossary, translate, review, send it back, do more, and when the project end is complete and final, instead of having it go back and being marked up like a 4th grade English paper. Because if you wait to the end, that's what's going to happen. And then your reviewers are going to tell, those of you who've done translation have probably heard this, your reviewers will tell you this is terrible. They don't understand the subject matter. Or what is it? Did they use Google Translate? Or who are these people? Why didn't we use somebody in country to translate this? So if you wait till the end and you upload all this work to your reviewer, you're going to get that type of feedback. But when they work on and they help you develop a well-defined glossary, they have buy-in in it. Now they've determined if it's cloudy outside or if it's overcast outside, because they're the ones that gave that to you. So now when you do a translation and it says it's overcast on every page, they gave you buy-in on that. So there's no subjectivity on which definition to use, because that's where most of the errors come from, are being subjective. The reviewers will make you out to be the hero or the goat, because one of the things that we ask our customers when we work with them is that, okay, what happens if this project goes south? We don't get any more business, right? Or whoever you use doesn't get more business, but you're the one that designed, the instructional designer, the project lead for the localization. They're the ones who are going to get egg on their face. They're the ones everyone's going to look at and say, you chose these people, why did you choose them? And most of the time it's because of the review process wasn't done correctly. It wasn't that the localization provider that you chose did a poor job. What was done incorrectly was how it was delivered and developed from the beginning. So the reviewers are imperative to make you successful or can make you fail drastically. And the part that comes in with the review team, to add to that, the teamwork part, is you have to get your stakeholders involved. Whether that's the business guy who owns on the business side, from the cost impact, and if it's a training for safety, I mean, what is the real impact there? So a reduction of incidents also means a reduction in your workers' comp modules, right, and how much money they pay. If you can reduce warehouse accidents, the cost to ensure that warehouse goes down. So there's a lot of stakeholders, and understanding who they are is really important to the success of the project. And whomever you decide to work with, make sure you choose a professional localization company that understands e-learning and has the right review process with you, because they're going to be the ones that are going to make you out to be a hero or the GOAT at working with your review team. Typically, there's only one person who on a review team. If you can have more than one person, that's great. They can go back and forth. They can do more review. They can complete the project faster. But what happens now, the more people you have doing the review, the more subjectivity is impacted, right? So is it cloudy outside? Is it overcast? Well, this person likes cloudy, but this person was raised in thinking that it's always overcast. So when you put your review team together, you have to make sure that they're in sync and working together as a team. And everybody has to be a part of the QA process, right? They review it, test it, review it, test it, review it, and test it again. So when you push it out to multiple cultures, you want to make sure it's accurate. You want to make sure that your target learners have the same opportunity to learn at the same level, to get the same amount of information as those that you designed it for in the source language. Well, that, in this case, for us, would be English. I've had people come back and say, yeah, the impact we're having in our multilingual training isn't the same impact we're having in our English. We think it's maybe because we're not hiring the same teams for internationally than we are domestically. Well, that's crazy, right? So basically saying that they're not as smart as the American teams, when in actuality it was because of the quality of the localization done to the content wasn't done at the same level and had the same impact. So you have to QA it with your reviewers and do ongoing testing. If you don't get your reviewers involved, they won't be able to understand the benefits to them. If you get the stakeholders, I mean the end users involved, they're going to give you feedback on the benefits of them, making sure that the localization is accurate and they're learning at the same level based on feedback you're getting. If you don't understand the business needs behind it, then no one can say, yeah, this is helping us save money or this is helping us make money. I'm only going to spend a second on this, but choosing the right localization partner is absolutely important, and we talked about earlier. And you have a resource of localization providers you've worked with in the past. Make sure you adhere to your checklist. Make sure you do the QA process with your review team, because that's really what is going to make the difference. If you don't do that, you're going to have a lot of issues. Make sure that they understand e-learning and had experience in e-learning. Look for a partner rather than a vendor. And when you do so, make sure they really understand. Back to the review team, I said this is my secret sauce, and I've talked about this for the third time now, but you really have to understand they're either going to be your friend or your foe. They're either going to be a part of this and feel like they're part of the success, or they're going to be the roadblock to make sure that you're not successful. So if your review team isn't part of the team, he will be your foe. And the more the merrier, right? So you have to have all the reviewers in place and have collaborative approach, right? So you have to make sure the subjectivity is there, isn't there, and make they change from cloudy to overcast, but it will help you in having more eyes of the better. And it goes back to what I said earlier about getting people committed. If they don't buy in, if they don't feel like they have skin in the game, if they don't feel like they're part of the success, everybody wants to be a part of the company's success. At least most people want to see the company do well. They want to make sure that the project that they're a part of is successful and does well. So you have to make sure you get them committed early on, because the review team will definitely destroy you if they don't have some type of shared accountability. If you don't get them committed, you don't get them on the hook for the project, they will be a roadblock to you. And if you don't continually get user feedback, and if you don't make sure you understand how all the different languages work on different devices, whether it's double byte characters, Chinese, Arabic, Cyrillic, and Russian, Latin languages grow at 130% to English. So if you don't have a QA process in place for your testing on multi-device, multi-browser, you're going to have issues when you try to deploy this on the end user. And lastly, because I ran through this pretty quickly, but lastly, we're going to make sure that we communicate this correctly, is that the linguistic assets, what are those? Those are the translation memories. Those are your style guides. You own them. You have to manage those accurately. So when you take your translation memory, and not a lot of people share this with their customers, but we make sure you understand you own that. So when you do your project, you have your TMs, your translation memory should come with your project. So regardless of who you use in the future, now they'll have this, what we call the pre and post translation content, right? You have the English and the target language translated. So now when you do more projects, they are able to bounce that, so to speak, against this database or identify repetitions in groups of words and phrases, which drastically drive your cost down. So the more translation you do in a certain language, your cost should go down drastically project after project. And this is intellectual property that you own. So for something a lot of people don't realize, that when you take proprietary company information and you run it through a search engine translation engine, you have then put your private IP into a public domain, and it is no longer private. So anything that is covered under an NDA that you have put through a translation engine is no longer private information. It's part of the public domain and cannot be held against anybody who may have shared that, because you have now made that public, made it accessible to the public. Very important to understand that. All the translated content that you put through, you own. The glossaries are so important. I mean, instead of having a few dozen words, your glossary should contain hundreds of words to make sure everything is well defined. The translation memories should be continually scrubbed. All your projects run against it, but this does two things for you. It's going to drastically reduce your costs over time, but it's also going to maintain consistency. You're going to say it's cloudy outside on every translation today and for the next years to come. As long as you do localization projects and you use these TMs, you'll have this consistency and your costs will go down greatly. And you had to do that by making sure that you create the right style guides, which you do already. You have to make sure you have a robust glossary, make sure the translation memories are up to date, and you can do all this through your authoring tools. I mean, a lot of you don't realize that, but some of the authoring tools that you use today have a translation functionality to it that plugs into translation management systems that localization companies use, and those are easily accessible and will help you greatly in managing your linguistic assets. The most important part is the intellectual property I talked about prematurely, but when you run contracts through Google Translate, or any other one, not just Google, but any translation engine, you've now put that contract or that information into a public domain and is not available. I mean, it is no longer covered under your NDA. Free translation never means free. With that said, I kind of got through this quickly. I know we only have 7 people. It's an intimate group, but I'd like to open this up to the floor. Are there any questions, comments? And where do I get those from, Justin?
Oh yeah, that's if anybody wants to just put their questions into the chat window there, we'll be able to check them out, and then Ray will be able to answer them for you.
No questions. Did everybody fall asleep? Okay, well then thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate you taking 30 minutes out of your day to listen to me talk about the 5 crucial steps for multilingual training. If you have any questions, you could reach out to Malou or myself. I'd be happy to answer them, give you any direction that I can. With that said, I'm going to hand it back to you, Justin. Thank you very much.
Actually, Ray, it looks like there's some questions are coming through there.
I don't see them
Uh,
anywhere.
oh, they're at the bottom in the chat window here. I can read them to you.
Okay, my
Malou,
chat window is...
it's okay. I can read them to you. Malou just asked if you could talk about the concepts of documentation and then localizing, how to localize the documentation.
Speak about documentation and localizing it. Okay, I'm assuming the movement from the creation of it, right? So when you develop any content, documents online, offline, right, you want to make sure that it's culturally neutral, right? You don't want to refer to any jargon or colloquialisms or any company-centric vernacular. You want to make sure it's very neutral and it's easy to localize. You don't want to say, I'm going to hit it out of the park, or we hit a home run, or Captain Fantastic and Mrs. Wow. You don't want to use that type of jargon because it's impossible to localize. So the more culturally neutral your content is, the easier it is to localizing it. And where is a good place to find reputable translation companies? Well, 2 places to start is with TrainingPros or with us. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have. But also, you can look at eLearning. Industry.com. They have some other ones other than us that do e-learning, but we'd be happy to help you in any questions you might have. Do you have any recommendations on how to manage version control by the time you finish the language? Sometimes, absolutely, right? So iterations and version control is really an issue I've spoken about before. But as you create content, you may have to make sure that whomever you're working with has what we call a translation management system. So as you send us updates, changes, edits, we're able to manage that in a system that you're able to see too. So we'll timestamp and date the updates and create an iteration that's easy to see in a root file. So that's one way I would recommend to do that. What tips do you have for kicking off projects involving multiple cultures and stakeholders? One at a time. Definitely one at a time, right? Identify if it's a multicultural, multinational rollout all at the same time, then there's ways to prioritize that. Whether it's what countries have the most revenue, what country has the biggest risk, where the biggest need is. But I would do those definitely one at a time and create that checklist that I mentioned earlier. Identify your stakeholders, assemble a review team, make sure you have all your content neutral, culturally neutral, and do that one country at a time, working with a localization provider who has multinational teams that can help you do that.
I think that's everything, right? I'm not seeing any more questions there. So I guess
A couple of
I'll
typing
just
right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's give him a second there.
Maybe not.
Yeah, but she might be. We'll see if Sandra's typing, but she just thanked us, so she might just be thanking us here. Just give her a second here, and sometimes that little prompt will stick there if a user's. Oh, yep, there is a question there. I will.
Great question. So the question is, what do you think about having your internal translation team rather than working with a localization provider? That's great if you have a team that are professional writers, because a lot of teams have in-country partners or team members that in country that speak that native tongue as a first language. Let's use Brazilian Portuguese for this example. So if people have team members in Brazil that speak Brazilian Portuguese, right? But the difference is that even though I have a college education and I'm an native English speaker, I'm not a trained or do I have the background or education to be a professional writer or trainer, right? So if these people have the educational background and the experience and speak the target language as a first language, then that would be a great resource for you, right? If you have those team members in place, as long as they have the writing skills, the subject matter expertise, and the understanding of the subject matter, I think that of e-learning, I think that would be an excellent choice to have.
Okay.
You're welcome. Okay, thank you guys again. I appreciate everyone taking the time to spend with me today, and Malou. And Justin, I'll hand it back to you and say, hope everyone has a great day and a great rest of the week.
Thanks a lot, Ray. It was a great presentation. I know that I definitely got a lot out of that. Hopefully everyone that joined us did too. Thanks everybody. It's another successful webinar. If you don't mind sticking around, I'm going to switch over to the feedback slides. Let us know how we're doing with the technical components of the webinar. And have a great day. And thank you very much. And we'll see you at the next webinar. Have a good one.